How many of you last week, you took God to work with you? Anybody? It's good. How'd it go? I'd love to hear. We can't have the conversation right now, but I'd love to hear about it. In my group, I meet with these guys. They're fathers, they're husbands, they're business guys. And they said, you know what, it was really challenging to do that. It was really challenging. They said they love the idea that Monday is game day, right? Monday is the game day, and Sunday, what we do in here, it prepares us to be able to go and live our life on mission for God. And so Monday is game day. So it really gave a lot of focus and meaning to our Monday, but it was really hard because that means, man, God is with me, and I got to forgive these guys that I work with. They said that was one of the hardest things. Man, I got to forgive them. I got to respect my boss. Man, and then they just started talking about all the difficulties in doing that, really challenging. And this has been our scripture as we begin this today in Romans chapter 12, verse 1. This is the Message version of the scripture. Message version is actually, it is not just a paraphrase, it's a translation, but it is a paraphrased translation. And here's what it says. So here's what I want you to do. This is Paul talking to Christians who are in Rome, many of them who did not grow up with a Christian background. Here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Take your everyday, your ordinary life. And he breaks it down. This means you're sleeping, you're eating, you're going to work, you're walking around, you're working in your home, you're working in your job, you're going to school. Take all of that, place it before God as an offering. When you do this, this is truly the way that we worship. So this is amazing, right? Paul says basically, you take your everyday, your ordinary life, you offer it to God, and God will do extraordinary things through that. And it actually becomes a way for you and I to worship, because again, like we said last week, typically think of worship as the 30 minutes that happen in here or the hour that happens in here. Worship, Paul says, is giving our life to God and using everything he's created us to do for his purpose, for his mission, and for his glory. So take your work, your everyday life, give it to him, and when you do that, God uses us in powerful ways. Now today, I want to talk about something that I think is difficult for us, because oftentimes we find ourselves in a place where we don't really want to be, right? And we find ourselves in a place where we're not going to be for the long term. But in those moments, we need to realize that no matter where you are, you're there because God has placed you there. Right now, and I know some of you are struggling with this already going, I hope that's not true, because this workplace, it stinks, man. God has placed you wherever you are. God has placed you there for his purpose right now. It may not be where you're going to be, and it may not be where you even want to be today. But you're there because God has placed you there for his purpose. He wants to use you. He wants to take all of who you are and do something in your life and through your life in the environment that he's placed you in. And again, some of you are going, man, that's a tough pill to swallow, because my work situation, my home situation where I work, and my school situation, it's rough right now. It's just rough, right? You're a stay-at-home mom or a brand new mom, and you're running on fumes. Now, I was going to say, I get this. Actually, my wife gets this. I get it to a degree. We have 5 kids. Totally understand. You're tired, you're worn out, and you're wondering, is this all there is? I mean, come on, this is not what I expected. You're in your workplace right now, and you're having a really difficult time working for the boss that you're working with, or with the coworkers that you're working with. And the people around you, your friends, your work, they're just wearing you out. You're a student, and you're struggling in your school. And again, your friends and the people around you, they're just wearing you out, and you're wondering, and you're asking the question maybe in your brain, is this all there is? This is not where I want to be, and this is not where I'm going to be in the long term. Is this all there is? Now, the good news is, if you've ever asked that question or wondered that, you're definitely not alone. In fact, there are plenty of people that we're going to read about, well, we're going to read about one in the scriptures, that asked or wondered or were put in situations where they're wondering the same kind of thing. And in it, what we find is that God is working powerfully in their life as they don't resist their environment and where God has them now, but they fully engage in it. And they are, it's not people that you think. You're thinking like pastors. They're not that. It's lawyers, it's doctors, it's politicians, it's mothers, it's fathers. It's a beauty queen, this woman named Esther, who won a beauty pageant. It is people like Nehemiah. It is Luke, this guy named Luke. He was a doctor. That was his profession. This guy named Paul, one of the who wrote almost like a third of the books in the New Testament. He was a tent maker. That was his profession behind his ministry. He was a tent maker. Jesus himself was a carpenter. These are people that engage in their environment and in their work, and God does powerful things in them, but he does powerful things through their life as they do that. So if you're wondering that, you're not alone, you're in good company. And today I want to look at the story of this guy named Daniel. He's pretty awesome. He's one of my favorite. There is a reason for the season that you're in, and I want to look at that through Daniel's life. Now, what we're about to read takes place during a wide span of time, but about 605 BC, the Babylonians invade Jerusalem and invade Israel. And this is the first of 3 invasions, and during each of the invasions, they are strategic in the way that they do this. When they conquer an area, they take, and in this first invasion, they take 10,000 of their best and their brightest leaders. Now, it does 2 things. It weakens the nation that they're invading, but it also builds the nation that they're building. So the Babylonians take out of Israel 10,000 of their best and their brightest, and they bring them back to their country to become servants and eventually leaders in their own country. But they bring them back, and here's what happens as they round them up. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, it's a servant's official, he says this, bring back into the king's servants some of the Israelites, and choose the ones from the royal family. Bring back the nobility. Bring back the young men who don't have any physical defect and they're handsome, showing aptitude. I know some of you you're already lost. You're going, that would have been me, but you're okay. You're showing aptitude for every kind of learning. They were able to learn. They were well informed, quick to understand, qualified to serve in the king's palace. And then he was to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians. They were supposed to indoctrinate them into the culture of the Babylonians, and he was to teach them all these things. And then they were also to assign to them a ration of food from the king's table, food and wine from the king's table, and they were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter into the king's service. Okay? So they take the best and the brightest, they bring them, and then they take away their culture, and they completely indoctrinate them in a brand new culture. It's a Babylonian culture, and there's 4 famous guys that you might know the names of. In Daniel, here, verse 6 and 7, it says this, among them were chosen these 4 guys from Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Those are their Hebrew names. And the chief officials gave to them brand new names. So the goal was to strip them of their identity and to make them Babylonians, not just in appearance, but in the way that they thought. And they started by even just stripping them of their name. So can you imagine this? And there's this thread that runs through this whole thing. And I want to bring this up in the very beginning. There is this beautiful thread that runs through this. Now think with me. This is not just a fairy tale or a myth. This is an actual historical account of something that happened. These are teenagers. They're like 13 to 17 years old. Think about this. Taken from their families. Probably families have been killed. Marched across 2 deserts, about 700 miles, away from their homes and what is familiar, brought into a completely foreign culture. They don't even speak the same language. They don't look the same. It's not the same music. It's not the same food. It's not the same reading. It's not the same worship. It's not the same deities. It is completely foreign. Teenagers. And in the midst of all of this, there is this thread that runs through the whole thing. And the thread is this, that they are never alone. Daniel is never alone. Him and his friends, they are never alone. I'm sure they were tempted to wonder, God, what are you doing? And why are you leaving us in this foreign country? And we feel all alone. But they are never alone. God initially gives them favor. Then God gives them wisdom. Beyond just learning, he gives them the supernatural wisdom. Then God gives them the ability to interpret dreams and to receive things that weren't even really present to everybody else. God uses them and actually saves them from death on many different crazy encounters. One of them we're going to read today. And then God elevates them to these positions of authority in a completely foreign culture. And even though it seems like they're alone, they are never alone. And you are never alone. You're never alone. Right now, you know what? It may feel like you are totally alone. Greg, you don't know where I'm at, and it may not be where you want to be, and it may not be where you're going to be, but you're not there by accident. God has placed you there for His purpose right now. And even though it may not be where you want to be or may not be where you're going to be, God has placed you there, and He is with you in it. He is with you in it. The hard part of life, I think, oftentimes is that we don't know the why. We never get the whys. And so we ask the question, God, why am I here? You may not get the why. But God always gives us the who. And this is way more important than the why. God may not tell you why you're there, but He will always be with you in your there. So wherever you're at right now, whatever circumstances of life you're in, your home or in your workplace or in your school, you may not know why. You may go, God, if you just help me understand why. And God may say, I'm just too big for you to know right now. You just need to know that regardless of whether you know why, you know who. I'm with you. I never leave you alone. I am working with you to fulfill my purpose with you in your place right now. So even if you never get the why, you got something better. You got the who. Honestly, I would rather have the who than the why. An explanation about why I'm in something doesn't help me as much as having that person of God with me. And so God promises His presence, not an explanation, though. There are no promises of His explanation. So some of you are in your situation, in your work, you're in your situation in your home, and you're wondering, why? Why has God left me here? Why am I here right now? And I want to look at the life of Daniel because I think this is a really powerful thing that Daniel does. He is faithful in his now. In fact, there are two things that I want to talk about today. Big picture things. Here's how Daniel engages. He engages by being faithful in his now. And then he engages by living a God-first life wherever God has him. Faithful in his now. God wants you and I to be faithful in whatever He's placed us in because He's placed us there for a purpose. And you may not understand why, but if you engage in it faithfully, God will get you to your next. He will get you to wherever He wants to take you. But what He wants is He wants you and I to engage and be faithful in whatever we're in right now. There is a purpose, and God wants to take all of who you are, your abilities, and everything that He's made you, wherever He's placed you, and He wants to work not just in your life, but He wants to work through your life, in the lives of the people, and bring a blessing to the people around you, to the people you work for, to your family. But in order for that to happen, it requires you and I being faithful in our now, and not resisting and waiting for something else until we begin that process of being faithful, but being faithful right now where we're at. And I want to look at what this looks like in Daniel's life. And so as Daniel now is in a foreign place with people that he probably doesn't want to be with, in a place where he probably doesn't want to be, and he doesn't know how long he's going to be there, Daniel makes a certain decision. Here's what happens. It says in verse 8, Daniel, he resolved. In other words, he made up his mind. He predetermined. He thought about this beforehand, and he made a decision before this situation ever came up. So as you're thinking about this, think it in the context of your home or in your workplace or in your school. Daniel resolved that he wasn't going to defile himself with the royal food and the wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. So Daniel makes a decision that he's going to live. In advance, he decides this. He's going to live with purity and integrity in his workplace. Okay, I may be here working for the Babylonians, but I'm not going to become conformed to the culture of the Babylonians. And I'm going to give everything I can, but I'm not going to allow myself to be defiled. So I'm going to maintain my purity and my integrity in my workplace. It's a great example for you and I. It's really hard to do. And let me tell you about the food just a little bit so you know what's going on. The food that the king and his family ate were foods that were offered to the gods or to the idols. So the king and his family, they always ate really well, right? Because the gods and idols, they don't eat food. But the whole point of it was that the food that was offered to the gods and the idols represented the power of the gods and the idols. And so when they ate the food, they were in essence imbibing of the power of the gods and the idols. Not only that, but it was looking to the future. Whatever promotion they got in life or in their career, they gave credit to the gods and the idols. So they're imbibing of the power, and they're already giving credit to the gods and the idols for any promotion. And Daniel, for some reason, as a teenager, think about this, 13, 17 years old, he draws a line and he says, I'm not going to do it. I'll work in this environment, and I'm going to serve you with everything I got, but I'm not going to worship your God. And this young, courageous teenager makes this decision. And he's so smart. He goes to his boss and he goes, hey, I know it's going to get you in a lot of trouble if you push back on what you're supposed to do, because you're supposed to make sure that we look good, right? Feed us, take care of us, and you're giving us that food. I don't want to eat that food. And so here, let me go present it like this. Don't tell them you're going to do this. Just for 10 days, let's run an experiment, and I become a vegan. Now, this is a big commitment right here. All you red meat eaters, I don't know, I haven't been able to do this one. He says, just give us vegetables and water for 10 days. And if at the end of 10 days we look like we're sick and emaciated like a vegan, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm joking. God, it's so wrong. I'm joking. I apologize. Then we'll eat whatever you put before us. However, if we look better, then just keep letting us do this. He had this conviction. He drew this line. And in your life, he pre-thinks it though. This is what it looks like to honor God, and I'm not going to cross that line. This is what it means for you and I to decide in advance. You already know some of the work situations, right? I see them flirting with other people and they got that promotion. Am I going to do the same thing, or am I going to honor my wife and the women in my life? Right? It's temptation. You're a student and everybody cheats, right? Come on, all of you who've gone to school before? Everybody cheats. In fact, sometimes it really messes up the curve when everybody cheats. It's almost like players playing on steroids. It gives them an unfair advantage. So are you going to do what everybody else is doing, or are you going to make a decide in advance that you're going to live with purity and integrity in your school? And sure, you could look over his shoulder and it might just make you, hey, I just trying to keep up with everybody else. Or are you going to in advance decide that, hey, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to dishonor God. I'm going to live with purity and integrity in my workplace like that. In your home, you're tired. I know. It's work. You're changing diapers, and you're tempted to complain. You're tempted to grumble, and you're tempted to get angry and resentful toward the people in your family. And you go, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to defile this environment. I'm going to love and enjoy my family, and I'm going to give my best, and I'm not going to grumble and complain and destroy the environment by doing that. Because you've made a decision in advance that you're going to live with purity and integrity in your work, no matter what your work environment is. In advance, though, you think about it. I have this really good friend. He got this new job as an accountant for this company that he'd been wanting to work for, and he was really excited about it. And the first week, they all told him that they were going to go eat at this particular restaurant, and it's Hooters. And he hadn't thought about this. So I'm just telling you, think about this. What are you going to do in those moments where you're tempted to compromise and to fit into the culture because you just got the job that you want? You don't want to be the one that sticks out. And so are you just going to flow along, or do you got a line that you're going to draw and say, you know what? God, he could have, I told him afterwards, I said, bro, you could have just said Buffalo Wild Wings, right? There's plenty of other places because they said the chicken wings are good. You're not laughing because you were thinking the same thing. Look, just don't go there. But pre-decide, pre-think what it looks like for you to live with purity and integrity in your workplace. And Daniel did that even when it could have cost him his own life. He decided in advance. Because godliness in our life, it doesn't happen by accident. Nobody ever just drifts into becoming a God-fearing, God-loving, God-honoring person. We have to work at it. We have to think it through and see what it looks like. And at the end of the 10 days, it says this: they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men and women who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and wine, and they were to drink, and they gave them vegetables instead. He made a decision that his priority number one was going to remain his priority number one. If I worship God through my work, God will honor me as I honor him. And God surely did honor him as he worshiped God in his work. And then as Daniel and his friends go on through this, they were supposed to remember the reason why they were there is they were supposed to learn the literature and the culture of the Babylonian culture. Because they were going to become the leaders. So could you imagine this? You're in a foreign country. You have to learn the language because they're speaking a completely different language. And so they have to learn not just the literature and learning like everybody else. They have to learn the language so they can understand the literature and the language. And this is what happened to these 4 young men. God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. Now, if you're a student and you're going, so awesome, forget that studying thing, I'm just going to pray more. Not a good strategy. God can only work with what you give him to work with, right? So the reason why Daniel had this supernatural wisdom and the things that he had learned is because he had learned them. He worked really hard and fully engaged. I had a teacher, one of our guys in our earlier services, a teacher at Iolani. He said, thank you for saying that. Because people think that just because they have a gift or an ability or even pray, that somehow they can just coast. And they don't. Nobody ever just coasts. Fully engaged these guys were at the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service. The chief official, they presented them to Nebuchadnezzar the king. And he talked with them, he interviewed them, and he found, this is so awesome, none. There was nobody that equaled Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, so they entered into the king's service. They were fully engaged in their work. When you do your work with excellence, it will increase your influence in your environment. They were fully engaged, and the king saw it, and he brought them into service. And in every matter of wisdom, not just in what they knew, but wisdom is the ability to use what you know. In every matter of the ability to use what they were learning and their understanding about which the king asked them questions, he found them 10 times better. It was Alabama and whoever they played yesterday. They were 10 times better, superior than all the musicians. But the only way that happened is they had to fully engage in their learning and literature and give God something to work with. And when they fully engaged, God gave them what they couldn't get, which is the supernatural portion. So let me just ask you this question. Think about it. How engaged in your work or your workplace are you? Again, it may not be where you want to be, and it may not be where you're going to be, but it's where God has you right now. Daniel had no idea. I'm sure he didn't want to be there. Everything he knew was taken away, and I'm sure he didn't know how long it was going to be, but that didn't stop him from fully engaging in his now. He was totally faithful and fully engaged in his now. And I'm speaking to young people right now. When I say young, I mean anybody younger than me. So that's a lot of you in this room right here. But if you're young and you're starting your career, I want to encourage you, wherever you find yourself, and you go, you know what, Greg, this is just a starter job. Great, start a job. At least you're working. Do it. And fully engage right now. Because what most of us do is we rent our now. Right? And you treat it like a rental. And have you ever lived in a rental home and you rented a car? You never treat that thing the way that you treat your own things. That's just, I don't know, it's just human nature, right? Whatever belongs to us, we take better care of and we put more into. And some of us, we treat our career and we're making a mistake by doing that. We're treating our school and we're making a mistake by renting it and not owning it. So if you're starting in your career and you just got that starter job and they're making you go get coffee, you know what they're doing? They're not seeing if you can make coffee. They're seeing if you'll do whatever it takes because you're serious about being fully engaged in your workplace. So here's what you do. You make that coffee, and if you make sucky coffee, you learn to make good coffee. And you do with all of your heart, and you come to your meetings on time. In fact, you come there early, and you're prepared for the projects you lead. And when you get an assignment, you engage with urgency, and you're not asking everybody what to do every step of the way, but you're taking leadership initiative, creativity, and you're leading in your organization. And when everybody else is playing on their Facebook, you go, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to lead, and I'm not going to steal time from my company. I'm going to be fully engaged and learn the work of my company. And you go the extra mile, and you care about the people that you work with outside of your work environment. And you are just fully engaged. And they're all talking smack and talking stink about the boss, but you're not doing that because you're there to be fully engaged. So you're building up your team, you're building up your boss, you're building up the project. I don't know how long you're going to be there. I don't know if it's going to be a forever thing or if it's just a right now thing, but it doesn't really matter. You're fully engaged. And if you're a follower of Jesus, you're up in the morning early because you know that the quality of your work will be dependent proportionally on the quality and depth of your relationship with God. The deeper relationship and the more quality relationship, the deeper your work and the more quality you work. And so you want to give your best, and you're up in the morning and you're reading the Bible because you want your life to be transformed into the image of God. So you got to figure out what that looks like. And God is transforming you, and you're praying, you're asking Him for direction because you want to make an impact in your workplace. So you're saying, God, there are people in my workplace, and I know you love them. I don't necessarily like them, but I know you love them. So Lord, help me reach them because I know that you love them. And you're seeking His will in your workplace because you're fully engaged in your work. You're fully engaged in your workplace. It may not be where you want to be. It may not be where you're going to be, but it's where you are right now, and you're doing it in faithfulness in your now, and you're fully engaged. Daniel did that, and he distinguished himself. He set himself apart. In fact, he had this conviction that he was going to live this God-first life, and here's what happens as we go on. We're going to fast forward now to Daniel chapter 6. And by this point in the book, here's what's happened. The Babylonians have been conquered by the Medo-Persians. So King Nebuchadnezzar, the king of the Babylonians, is no longer king. Daniel has actually outlived him now. And the new king is this guy named Darius. Now, Darius is an administrative genius. And he comes into the environment, and he rearranges the environment, and he sets up like 120 provincial governors to govern different regions, 120 of them. Again, he's an administrative genius. And then he chooses 3 people that are going to be like prime ministers over the governors. 120 governors, they were called satraps, and then over them just 3. And so here's what happens as this genius of a leader does this. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, and one of them was this Hebrew guy. He's not even a Medo-Persian. He's not a Babylonian. He's a Hebrew. He's from a place that's 700 miles away that has been overthrown. He was one of the 3. Again, if you fully engage and you do your work with excellence, it will increase your influence in your workplace, in your family, in your school. The satraps, they were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. So Daniel has this large responsibility. Now Daniel, watch this. This is so cool. Daniel distinguished himself. It doesn't say that God distinguished Daniel. Daniel distinguished himself. The way that Daniel lived and his decision to live with purity and integrity in his work, the way that Daniel lived and to fully engage in his workplace and to do everything with all of he had as unto God, that distinguished him among the other administrators and the satraps because of his exceptional qualities. The ESV says his excellent spirit. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. So can you imagine this now? You're from the area. You grew up. You feel entitled to what Daniel looks like he's going to get. Now, really important to know is at this time, Daniel is no longer a teenager. He is actually 80 years old, or somewhere in his 80s, scholars tell us. That means that he has been serving faithfully, engaging fully in his work, and living by his decision to live a life of integrity and purity in his work for over 60 years now. He wasn't just faithful in his now, he has become a faithful presence in all of the Medo-Persian kingdom. And these guys see what's going to happen, and they're jealous. They're jealous. Again, if you do your work in a way that honors God, God will honor you. And so Daniel does that, and they're jealous, and it's clear to him what he lives for and who he's living for and what he's all about. And this is what it says. At this time, the administrators and the satraps, they tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct against government affairs. Couldn't find any dirt on him. Nothing. But they were unable to do so. Not even an accusation. So the only corruption, so they could find no corruption because he was totally trustworthy. At this point in his life, after 60 years, the best they can do is nothing. So what they decide to do is to challenge him on the thing that they know he will not compromise. Okay, we couldn't get him to compromise his desire to honor God, but can we get him to compromise his faith? Because that's the one thing that we can challenge him on. So here's what they do. They go to the king and they trick the king and they butter up the king and say, King, you're the greatest. We should have this period of time, these 30 days, where, everybody is bowing down and they're worshiping you and they're praying only to you. And the king's like, oh, yeah, okay, that sounds good. And if anybody doesn't do this, then they should be thrown into a pit of hungry lions, king, so that everybody knows that you're the man, you're the king. And you got to enforce this. And the king says, yeah, sounds good. So they sign this decree, and the decree goes out. And Daniel now, in his workplace, is one of these guys in line for this promotion, gets the decree, and look what he does. This is crazy. He does the right thing, even when doing the right thing is going to hurt. Even when he knows it's going to cost him if he does the right thing. So Daniel, he learned that this decree had just been published. He went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem, and 3 times a day he got down on his knees and he prayed. Now the prayer is not new. The fact that it is mentioned as a detail that Daniel opens the window to do this, that might have been new. In other words, Daniel's going, you know what, I'm gonna be bold and not obnoxious, but I'm going to be bold about my faith towards God. This is not going to be a secret. This is going to be something, but he's not obnoxious though, but he's bold, and he throws open the windows, he kneels down, and he begins to do what he's done for the last 80 years of his life. He prays. He prays to God, and he thanks God just as he'd done before. Just as he'd done before. This is not something that Daniel decided in the moment. This is something that Daniel had been doing for the 80 years that he was alive. For 80 years, he'd been developing an intimate relationship with the Lord. His conviction was based on the assurance of a relationship with God. And this was not something that he just decided, you know what, I'm just going to throw up a Hail Mary because if they find out that I'm a God worshiper, they're going to. This is something that he had been doing for the last 80 years of his life. And he knelt down. There's something about, and I would encourage you to do this. Think about this. What if tomorrow morning you knelt down? And instead of kneeling down to all the emails that you're going to eventually kneel down to and worship them, instead of doing that, starting your day that way, you knelt down. That kneeling, there's something about it. It's a posture of humility. It's a posture of desperation, right? For the guys, you know, when you propose to your wife, you can go, hey, it'll be a real privilege of you if you marry me, right? And some of you, maybe you did, you can go back and change it. You get down, right? It's a posture of humility. It's a desperation. You're saying, you know, will you marry me? And really what you're saying, please, 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 please marry me. That's what you're saying on the inside. It's this posture of desperation. God, I want this relationship with you. And I fear you more than I fear X, Y, or Z. And this is not a relationship just for what you can do for me, but it's a relationship, will you please give me the conviction to be able to live for you and do the right thing, even when it hurts. That's what I really want, God, because I know wherever I am, I'm there to honor you. And if I fully engage in it, and if I decide that I'm going to honor you with purity and integrity in my workplace, I want to have the courage to do the right thing, the conviction to do the right thing. So God, please give me that conviction, direct me through my day, so that I can really give you the honor that you deserve. And so Daniel does that. And just a real quick paraphrase of the story. What happens is the king really likes Daniel. I mean, Daniel's a good guy. He's a great worker. He's about to promote him. The king is pretty much on Daniel's side. He doesn't eat that night. He can't go to sleep. He gets up early in the morning, goes down to where the lion's pit is, where Daniel's been thrown in there. And there's faith in the king. The king says, hey, Daniel, did your God that you served, did he save you? And Daniel shouts out, yeah, I'm good. And so the king says, get him out, pulls him out, and the king says, your God is the living God. He's the God that rescues. He's the God that saves. He's the God that intervenes and does what no other God can do. That's your God. And this ungodly king worships the God of Daniel, and he sends out a memo into all the land. And he basically says, everybody in the land, you don't have a choice. You will worship the God of Daniel. You will. Because he is the King of all kings. He is the Lord of all lords. He is the one who saves and rescues and does what nobody else can do. That's who Daniel's God is. When you engage in your workplace, in your home, in your school, and you are faithful in your now. I know it may not be where you want to be, and it may not be where you're going to be. But it's where God has put you right now. And he's put you there for a purpose. And he wants to work in you, and he wants to work through you. And you can partner with him by being faithful in your now and by living a God-first life. And so this morning, I just want three things I want to challenge you to do this morning. Number one, I want to challenge you to be faithful in your now. For some of us, that means instead of resisting where you are right now, fully engage in it. And trust that as you fully engage, God will get you to your next. He will get you to your there. But be faithful with your now. And secondly, make a decision to put God first and live a God-first life. Make that decision. If there are any areas of your life that God is not first, let him be first place in those areas. It's just as simple as saying, God, I'm surrendering this area of my life to you. It doesn't mean that you can. It means that you're willing to let God help you do what he wants you to do. As you look at that area, you go, I don't know if I could ever be different in that area because I've always been that way. That's not the point. The point is, are you willing to live God first and honor him that way? If you are, then say, God, please be first in this area of my thoughts. Be first in this area of my finances. Be first in this area of my family. Lord, be first in the way that I treat my coworkers. Lord, be first in these things that I engage in. You be first and live a God-first life in those areas. And then the third one is, let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's take God to work with us again this week. Let's go again. Another week, take God to work with us again. Right? Because regardless of what your job is, regardless of where you are right now, God wants to do amazing things as you offer to him your everyday, your ordinary life. Worship team, you can come and join me this morning. He wants to do amazing things. He's got you exactly where he wants you to be because there are people that he wants to reach through your life. And the way that that will happen is as you are faithful in your now and you make a decision to put God first and live a God-first life. And that looks like deciding in advance that you're going to live in purity and integrity in your workplace. It means being fully engaged in what you do and distinguishing yourself that way. And it means living your life in such a way so that everybody knows you're not just a faithful person, there's a faithful presence in your life. There's a faithful presence in your life. In your notes this morning, doing the right thing even when it hurts. And as you do that, God uses people like you and I to reach other people. I've got one real quick story, okay? When we first moved here about 10 years ago, our soccer coach is this guy, Trey. He's our soccer coach. He's our kids' soccer coach. This is 10 years ago. Everybody's a little younger back then. And in that time, we realized that God had placed us in somebody's life for a purpose. And Chris and I began to pray for this family. After that soccer season, we were really hoping that we'd be able to play soccer again with them. It didn't happen, and we didn't see them for actually many years. And off and on, we would pray for them faithfully. When I say faithfully, I mean as they would come to mind, we'd pray for them. And every once in a while, we'd run into them and pray for them again. About 4 or 5 years later, they just showed up here at church on their own. They must remember that we were still here. And in that process of the next couple of years, Wendy ended up coming to know Christ, and that's her baptism in her grace group right there, her small group of people. Trey was a little bit slower in coming. He blames it on me, but I blame it on him. But anyway, everybody's got a timing, and Trey we continue to meet together and just talk about having a relationship with God and what that would look like. And then other guys joined together with me. We formed what we call a small group, just small group guys. And it's so helpful for them to see what this looks like in the real world. And one day, Trey came and said, hey, you know that prayer that you say at the end? I just want to let you know, I haven't believed in that Jesus stuff, but I am now. Oh, okay. So, yeah. So he now, like all of us, is learning how to live out our faith in our workplace and how to offer our everyday, ordinary lives to God as an offering, as a worship. So you don't know what God will do through your faithfulness. In fact, some of you don't know what God has already done through your faithfulness. And I want to encourage you, he wants to keep doing it. So whatever your now is, be faithful in it and live God first in it.